I've read his book, Low Intensity Operations. It's basically...
His book is called Low Intensity Operations?
Yeah. You use local forces rather than your own, so they use loyalist paramilitaries.
Yeah.
They basically were directed by British intelligence. You use the media, you get your people into the media, so the media thing is pumped out. You use the courts. And the courts were changed from, they set up what was called diplomat courts, so they removed juries. So now you only had one judge. But the judge should, for the comments, remind himself that he was a jury as well as a judge.
Wow.
They changed the powers of arrest, that you could be held for 7 days without access to a solicitor. They set up new interrogation centres. All specific. So I think what happened, the Brits were caught unawares in the early 70s. But once they started to see how things were rolling out and that the IRA hadn't been defeated, they devised this very elaborate policy. And one part of it, criminalisation, was about the prison. So now they're going to say that there was no such thing as political prisoners. There wasn't a political struggle going on here. It was just sectarian warfare. And it's really interesting that in that 76 there was a new radio station set up, which is still going today, Downtown Radio. And it did news broadcast every 15 minutes, which was very unusual at that time. And a whole new language was introduced, so it was about sectarian gangs, mafia-style shootouts. That language is never used.
Mafia-style shootouts?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That was never used in 75. And I remember talking to a woman that's been interviewed by a woman from BBC Radio 4 who came over from London. And she started to talk. As we were talking, I was getting a bit annoyed by her language. And I said, do you ever, out of curiosity, just listen to your own broadcasts from 1975? Because you actually talk about IRA active service units. That was just the way to do it. But a year later, you're talking about sectarian gangs and Godfathers, mafia-style shootouts and sectarian gangs. And to her credit, shown away. And she contacted me a few days later and she says, I'm amazed.
Yeah.
So it's about how you use language, words, you drop, and every 15 minutes it's getting pumped out, there's more and more. And so it just creates this image of whatever. But anyway, what I meant for the jail was that we would no longer be treated as political prisoners. They built a new part of the same prison called the H blocks. There was 8 of them. It was going to be single cells. You'd wear a prison uniform, you'd do prison work, you would be integrated with loyalists and ordinary prisoners. So the first person to be sentenced under the new regime was a guy called Kieran Nugent from Falls Road in Belfast, who had already been in prison as a schoolboy internee. He was still 15 or 16 when he was interned, and then he had been in prison for Rahman. So you're talking about the age of people. When I was 19, almost 20 going in, that was the average age. So anyway, Kieran was going to be sentenced. We looking back on it, it shows you just how ignorant you were about things. Because we thought this is just another silly policy that the Brits have come up with. Give it 6 months and it'll be done away with. So we're just not going to wear the prison clothes. That's it. I mean, simple as that. And let's get on with it. So Kieran was sentenced to 3 years for IRA membership. He was taken to the H blocks. They told to strip and put on the prison uniform. He refused to put it on and came out with this famous statement, "You'll have to nail it to my back." And badly beaten, put into a cell. And the only thing he had to clothe himself in was a blanket. And that became known as the blanket protest. Lasted 5 years. And it was joined at its height. There was probably about 450 of us on it. There was always about 350 some people left because they just couldn't take the brutality or the whatever else was happening in family issues and such like. But basically, we run a protest which meant you're locked up 24/7. You didn't have radio or TV or books or magazines. It's easier to say what you had, which was a piece of sponge for a mattress. You had 3 blankets. You had a water gallon. You had the compulsory Bible, which we used to use the pages to roll up or make cigarettes out of. You weren't allowed to smoke. Everything had to be smuggled. You weren't allowed pens or papers. So for instance, all the writings of Bobby Sands, who was one of the prisoners who then died on hunger strike, is famous now for his writings and his poetry and his songs. But everything he had to hide it inside his body.
Yeah.
The pens, the cigarette papers he would write on, everything had to be smuggled out, smuggled in. And it's to the credit of the community on the outside, and particularly young women. who became the couriers to the prison, smuggling the letters, smuggling them out, taking them to the IRA. I mean, there was occasionally, and the prison guards did their best to try to capture any of this stuff. It was hidden in all sorts of orifices in their body, from nose, mouth, the anus, everything. But and they did catch some of it, but there was like a river of communication flowing into the prison. Bobby Sands could write to the Army Council of the IRA in the morning, get an answer back in the afternoon.
Wow.
It was just so...
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's about how people in that situation, on the outside, just... I suppose I didn't realise it the later years, the impact of it, because you're living in the middle of it. It's almost like you're in the eye of the storm. But for people on the outside, I suppose they thought, well, if these people are doing this in jail, we need to step up to the plate.
Yeah.
And yet, actually, some of the things they did was, because they were being beaten off the streets, plastic bullets were being fired. A number of people killed by plastic bullets by the police because they didn't want people on the street, because that became a visible sign of support.
Right.
We ended up, the protests intensified in March 1978. And so it had been going on for almost 2 years by then, and I think the prison authorities were surprised that it had lasted that length of time, and then began what we believe was a concerted attempt to just literally beat us off the protest, denying us toilet facilities, etc., etc. So we ended up, without them planning for it, in what became known as the No Wash protest, although it's interesting, the British referred to it as a dirty protest. There's a big difference between saying the No Wash.
The No Wash protest.
We were refusing to wash because we wanted proper washing facilities, we wanted towels, we wanted proper access to washing and toilet facilities. They're denied, and within 3 days we ended up in what became known as the No Wash protest. And it lasted for 3 years, so I didn't wash from March 1978 up until the 2nd of March 1981.
You're kidding. Oh, wow.
So you've got all hair and straggly beard, and again, thinking on it in later years, this is the image your family see when they come up, and we got a visit once a month if you're prepared to wear the prison clothes. And initially we didn't, but then when the protest intensified and the No Wash, we decided it was a better tactic for communications to wear the prison clothes, to go out on the visit to tell people what's happening, basically.
Yeah.
You could smoke on the visits too, and like you can imagine someone coming up on the visit, thinking of it now, because we were like chain smoking on the visit.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there, and I'm tall, I'm 6'2", I'm about probably 13 stone now, but I end up at that time, even before the hunger strike, 10.5 stone, so you're thin, and you're sitting smoking it. Any news outside, and how's things going? You're saying, yeah, everything's sound, and it's like,
yeah, right.
So like the impact on families, but then, people came together, there was protests, there was marches, there was everything you think of to try to resolve the situation. And I suppose in Irish history there's always been hunger strikes by Republicans over conditions, over recognition. Actually, political status had been won in the first place in 1972 after a hunger strike. So there's always this aim doing it, but I suppose wiser heads had argued against it, because we knew at this time criminalisation was such a big plank in this overall strategy. Maggie Thatcher was in power at the time, and even in England was destroying her own communities, the mining community and everything else, So, but anyway, it came to a point where we just couldn't go on indefinitely on a protest like that. There was a hunger strike called at the end of 1980. 7 men joined it. At the one time, it went on for 53 days. There was all sorts of behind-the-scenes talks between the Brits and the IRA through a number of priests and other people who are now known. It's all documented now. But the hunger strike then ended when one of the prisoners was at a point of that he's going to die soon, and ended on the basis that there was a document that had already been produced, which could be enough to make a compromise. But because nothing was signed, sealed, delivered, agreed upon, and the hunger strike was over, Brits just reneged on everything. So we were sitting Christmas 1980 in the exact same position as we had been before the hunger strike ever began.
Right.
And I suppose probably then the Brits would have thought, well, we'll be, Maggie Thatcher